Welcome back to the International Commission podcast. Today, Brooke and Bucky are here, and we're on our best behavior because today we have a very special guest, and it's our boss, the president.
The president
of the International Commission, Mark Goode.
Hi, y'all.
There's no B, but it sounded better, so we're rolling with it today. On this podcast, we like to tell stories from the mission field, let you in on what it's like to go on mission trips with us, what our partners around the world do every day to share the gospel, how to share Christ with people from different worldviews, religions, different contexts, and we laugh a lot and learn a lot. What I'm going to talk about today, Brooke.
Hey, everyone. Welcome, boss. Today,
Hey.
We're going to give you all a little insight into our opening and closing rallies that happened during our IC trips. And then we'll be having a fun Q&A with our president. And then we'll be doing a Did You Know segment to close it up. So let's go ahead and get started. And Mark is smiling because he doesn't know what to expect from any of this.
Right. What even happens?
Is this the real life?
First, we're going to be talking about our opening and closing rallies during an IC trip. And you can expect to experience these on every trip with us. They all might be a little bit different, format or venue, or what happens at the closing rally might be a little bit different based on where you are in the world and what the churches have planned, because we're just partnering with them. We've all gone on different trips and we've probably all got different experiences with these. And first, we want to just talk about what they are in the first place and why we do them. And so at our opening rallies, this is after our visiting team gets there on an international partnership. We've checked into the hotel or wherever we're staying. We have probably had a team meeting. We have done some orientation to discuss what the schedule for the week is, reminders about cultural issues we need to be mindful of, and all those sorts of things. Probably met some of our local coordinators or other nationals that are helping to lead us. And then we all go together and meet with representatives from all the different churches that have been preparing for months and months and months before we get there. And we get together to celebrate the kickoff for us of this partnership, even though they've been in it preparing, but the kickoff of the week of evangelism. And usually there will be some worship, maybe some testimonies, kind of a muster speech to get us all riled up. And what else?
I know that for me, I've been on 2 international trips with IC, and they both looked really different. One was in South America, one was in Middle Eastern area. So you can expect them to look pretty different. But the idea is the same. You gather with churches or church members, and it's lots of invitation. And a lot of times you'll have meals. I've had meals at both of them. And so we just get to spend time together, and you get to meet your translators, usually at the opening rally. And so it's a lot of just relationship building. Sometimes they'll invite people who are not a part of the church, but people they're just inviting that might be on their Operation Andrew list. And so these are people, you might be able to encounter later on in the week as well and get to go to their homes and share the gospel with them. That is what happened to us on our trip in Jordan. We got to have a meal together. It was a lot more low key than the one whenever I was in Bolivia. Mark, did you have anything?
Yeah, you mentioned one of the things that I enjoy the most, and that's meeting the translator, meeting the interpreter for me that particular week, especially if it's of a country that I don't speak the language,
Right.
Because it puts me at ease from the very beginning. I can speak with this person in English and they can speak back to me. It might be broken. It might be a little quirky in a way, but it's really a great way to start that relationship. And sometimes you'll have the same translator all week. Sometimes you'll have a different translator. It might be a different translator every day, but you get to meet the different ones. And I love the fact that we get to meet the pastors of the churches that have invited us to be a part of this partnership. That is exciting. And typically their wives or their family is there. And as you said, people from the church that you're going to be working with, and you'll meet up with the team that you're actually going to go visiting, and that they are excited because they have taken their Operation Andrew list, set up those appointments, and they're excited to take you to meet those people. And obviously the main goal is to share Christ with them and see them come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. So that's exciting in itself. And you're right, we do worship. Typically we will have some sort of Christian fellowship at the end. It's a lot of times it's desserts from their particular part of the world, and that's always interesting. But I love the opening rally, and the closing rally is another thing, and that's even another highlight. But y'all may want to go on to something else first.
Well, I was going to talk about the fact that we this is the point where we kind of break into our smaller teams or pairs. Mm-hmm. So the American team has come all together. We've traveled all together. We've talked about that on previous episodes, the travel days, and we have our orientation, but we all go together. And then we get introduced to the local church teams that we'll be working with. So usually we try to split off our larger team by twos to go with churches. And it's just, it's really fun to initially meet them, give a high five, handshake, hug, and pull away a little bit, and you can talk to them. And so sometimes that's why we have the meal afterward. So we can get to know everybody, but especially get to know the team that we're working with. Now, some places we've also had time for a strategy meeting right then during the closing rally. Mm-hmm. And I always think that's cool because it shows me how purposeful the whole local team has been and that they really want to get to business. And so we've sat down and talked about our schedule for the week with our churches directly. How many visits we'll have each day, what kind of special events they might do. A lot of churches will do some kind of an evangelistic outreach or service in the evenings. And sometimes the next day is Sunday and we go to church with them. And sometimes they'll have visits already.
Right.
So we want to be well acquainted and get to know each other a little bit. So
another thing that I've been able to do with some of my translators or interpreters, whichever way you want to call them, on that first meeting is to actually practice going through the way that I'm going to share the gospel. Maybe read my testimony, maybe show them the Evangelium or the three circles, and kind of get a rhythm for how I would speak. Because it's different when you're speaking with an interpreter. You speak a sentence or two, and then you have to wait. And then you pick up again. And that takes a little practice. It's not scary, but you just want to make sure that the message is clear. Also, I'm very Texan, and so my Texan accent or my colloquialisms from North Texas might be different and not understandable to the interpreter. If I say, well, we're fixing to go down to the store or whatever, somebody might not understand that. So you need to kind of think through that. And that practice time actually becomes a good, just like in athletics, you practice before you go and play the game. And not to say this is a game, but to say that you want to do it the right way and have it accomplish what it's meant to accomplish.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea, especially because sometimes we talked about this, I think, on a previous podcast, Bucky, but just as you prepare your gospel presentation with a translator, it's good to practice beforehand so that they know and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't say it like this because it might be better to approach it this way. And so they can give you kind of those pointers so that whenever you're in the conversation and they're trying to translate, it's not awkward of them trying to understand. And so, yeah.
Yeah, practicing beforehand is great, and getting on the same page and talk about what we're going to do when we go to a visit. Who's going to introduce us? Are you going to pass it off to me at some point? Do you want me to lead someone in a prayer if they accept Christ, or would you like me to pitch it back to you? All those sorts of things. You're a team. Right. So there's a time to get together and come up with your team plan. If you don't get to do that the day of the closing rally, you'll get to do that probably after church. Mm-hmm. And so you just want to make sure that you do take that time to be strategic. But anything else you wanted to mention about those?
Another thing I really have enjoyed about the opening rallies especially is you start to get to see the culture immediately whenever you're there, and just, of believers, and so that's really an exciting time because we see our culture, but getting to go there getting to hear them worship in their own language. You might get to hear some songs that especially some hymns and everything that have been translated into that language, which is really cool. So you can kind of have that little glimpse of heaven of us singing in our different languages, And so I think it's really cool getting to see how people worship and the different ways that you have meals as well. Whenever we were in Jordan, our kind of opening rally, they had a meal that they cooked completely underground.
It was so cool.
It was so cool. And so it was just a metal, huge round ring, and it had different levels, and it had potatoes and meats and vegetables and everything. And they had slow cooked it down underground. And then we got to see them pull it up with the little pulley. It was really cool. And then they served everyone with that. And so it's just something that I'd never seen before. So it's really cool getting to see just that first glimpse of culture.
And they really love to share their culture with us.
Yes.
And of course, that's one of my favorite things about going is I'm a learner, and I want to learn their culture. And especially in those first couple of days, you get to experience more of it and kind of get in the mindset. I've been studying about this culture and maybe their values, the predominant worldview there and things like that. But then to be immersed in it and to experience it, it really helps you kind of get primed for the week. So that's always cool.
Yeah.
So what's different about the closing rally at the end of the week?
Yeah,
it's even more exciting because people have come to Christ.
Yeah, it's a lot of celebration and praise. And a lot of the people that have come into faith will come to the closing rally. So it's just a lot bigger. And it's sometimes in a different location as well. They get a bigger stadium area.
Yeah, in like a stadium or an arena. Sometimes it's at one of the churches or the larger ones, but sometimes it's in an arena. Actually, we even did one in a park, like an amphitheater in a big park in Spain. And we had baptisms and the band and people giving testimonies. It was really, really cool. And people would, because it was in a public place, people walking by would get really curious and they would come in, and more people came in and heard the gospel. It was really cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's what I love about it. And of course, we celebrate by worshiping. And again, more of the same thing, learning. You'll pick up a little bit of the language as you sing the songs, or the screen will have the words in the foreign language. And it's always a challenge to me, but I want to sing in that language as well as in my own. So that's always a good thing. And the Holy Spirit is just amazing when you have that many Christians together worshiping God. Brooke mentioned it a minute ago. It's just kind of a little taste of heaven, because you've got all of that and the excitement of the fact that the Holy Spirit has worked that week in all of the work that the participants have done in preparation for us to come has resulted in someone coming to faith in Jesus Christ. And as the Bible says, heaven rejoices anytime that happens. We rejoice on earth, and then we all celebrate together at the closing rally. And there's always a great message and testimonies from some of the people, and sometimes even the ones that have been miraculously saved, maybe out of a life of sin and deprivation, but yet God has saved them. And we've even had situations where they have given their idols, the idol worship that they have been accustomed to, they've given those over, and they've said, we don't want this. They burned them. They give it up. Those are exciting times.
And it's real, and you just see how God has moved. And it's always a good time also to encourage them to keep it going.
Yes.
You've seen what God has done this week through just us, ordinary people, you who live here, us as visitors, just simply going and doing what Jesus has commanded us to do and partnering with him. He did all the work. And now you realize that you just stepped up and said yes. And look what God did. So keep this going, continue the work, and make sure to follow up with the discipleship for these new believers.
And one of the things that we say in our mission statement is that we make disciples. And the cool thing is, about midweek of this project or this participation that you're involved in, you might, as a participant, an American participant, you hand over the responsibility to your interpreter or to the church members that are there with you. Then you don't even maybe need the interpreter, because they're speaking in their language, and they begin to share the gospel, and they get confidence in the fact that I can do this myself. And then it goes on further, and then it grows. And then they do what we call an end-to-end, a national to national. And it just continues. That's how the ministry has grown over the years, over these 50 plus years that we've been involved. So that's exciting.
People catch the fire and the vision, and they just keep
right.
going and keep spreading and keep spreading. And one of the really cool things that we see sometimes is that other churches or other believers maybe in that area that didn't participate see it and they think, wow, I got to be part of that next time.
Yep.
And that's another way that we grow.
Something I love about IC is we are okay with things being out of our hands and in the Lord's hands. And so just like national to national partnerships, it's so many times it's just like, this is the Holy Spirit doing this, and we're not going to try and, take ownership or, anything, because they're the ones taking ownership and the Holy Spirit is doing the work, just allowing the locals to do what the Lord is leading them to do.
It's always awesome. All right. There's so many other things we could say about the closing rally and what it's like to leave the new friends that you've made.
There's usually some tears too.
Yeah.
Tears of happiness, tears of, gosh, God be with you till we meet again. And guess where that meet again probably is going to be? It's going to be in eternity. In heaven.
We see that. And we look forward to that, Revelation 7 vision. Maybe next time we do this, it'll be with all nations, tribes, and tongues.
Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes you get to go back and work with those folks again. So that's always a cool opportunity.
Yep. Since we've been so blessed by our very own president, we thought we would do a little Q&A with you. It might not be a Q&A you're expecting.
Okay.
But we're going to do a little rapid fire questioning where you only have a few seconds to respond. I know that it's a little later in the day, so you're not fresh on coffee, so you're just going to have to respond.
Okay.
There'll be a combination of yes and no questions or would you rather questions. And remember, no deliberating, no hesitating. Just go with the first answer that comes to your mind as we ask the questions. And so I think Bucky and we can go back and forth on ours.
Okay.
And again, for those listening, these may or may not tell us who Mark Goode is as a person, but that's okay. We're just going to see, Whenever you are ready, Mark and Bucky, we can start.
Right, let's go. Here goes a lightning round. You start, right. Brooke. Ready, set, go.
All right, Mark. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
City or country?
City.
Books or movies?
Movies.
Would you travel to Antarctica?
Woo! If I had a big coat.
Would you ever move to another country?
Maybe.
Yes or no?
Yes or no, Mark?
Yeah.
Oh, yes or no?
Spiders or snakes?
Ooh. Spiders.
Castle or beach house?
Beach house.
Puzzle or board game?
Puzzle.
Lord of the Rings or Chronicles of Narnia?
Lord of the Rings.
Europe or Asia?
Europe.
Do you like to cook?
No.
Cake or cookies?
Cookies.
Do you listen to music while you work?
Yes.
Have you laughed today?
Oh, yes.
I already know that.
Time travel to the past or future?
Past.
Would you rather have a personal maid or a chef?
Chef.
Window or aisle?
Aisle.
Black or cream and sugar?
Black.
Ever eaten a bug on purpose?
Yes.
Barefoot or shoes?
Shoes.
Can you surf?
Yes.
Can you juggle?
Yes.
Wow. Roller skating or ice skating?
Roller skating.
Favorite airport?
Tampa.
What size is your bed?
King size.
All right. Tent or hotel?
Hotel.
And, okay, that's the game clock.
All right, Mark, you win.
Did I pass?
You passed.
I am certifiably now.
We're gonna have to see some juggling on a surfboard.
Yeah.
I know,
oh,
right?
well, you didn't say that. You just said juggling or.
Well, if you can do both, can you do them both?
Yeah, just
I
put
don't
those
know.
skills
My balance
together.
is not as good as it used to be. That's
Okay.
fun.
Thanks for participating, Mark. Now that we've done that portion, we really want to ask you some legit questions for
Okay.
you, just about presidency, time with IC, My first question, what has being IC's president taught you about just dependency on the Lord and faith in the Lord?
That's a great question. I'm learning every day about the dependency on the Lord, most of all in our financial portion. In other words, yes, we depend on people's finances to help us in participation on all these partnerships that we do, and to pay the light bill and to pay the people that work for us and all the different things. But there's definitely that dependency, and I'm learning even more so, and I've learned from the ones who came before me how dependent they were in years past. And I speak especially about Ben Meath and Rodney Cabot, because I've had long conversations with them about their total dependence upon the Lord over the years. And I've already seen where we need something from a financial point of view, and all of a sudden it happens. And it's not something that I did or something that you did or anybody did. It was the Lord's doing. And so I think that is one of the greatest things that it's teaching me, is to live even further by faith, not just in the finances, but in the asking for wisdom. And you have not because you ask not. That's something that has become a reality in my prayer life and in my being in this first quarter of 2024.
That's good. What has been the biggest challenge about being president?
Wow. Whether to use black or blue ink when you sign your name. No. I guess the biggest challenge is getting my mind around how great and how large, how vast this ministry is. I thought I knew a lot about IC, having been here 4 years and having worked as a mobilization strategist and as vice president of mobilization and so forth. But to get down into the nuts and the bolts and visit with our AST vice president and our mobilization vice president and our financial vice president, and to go all the way down deep and look at the vast things that are being done by this ministry. You can look at it on the surface and it looks all smooth and nice and pretty. And underneath, it's like the proverbial duck on the water. Our feet are going like crazy, but yet we have the faith and the wisdom to look above and to know that God has us. And this is God's ministry. It's not Mark's ministry. It's not Bucky or Brooke's ministry. It is God's ministry. And to know that He is the one that's supplying our needs, and He is the one that's giving us the guidance. So yes, it's a big challenge, but yet we have a big God. And I have a big faith that God is leading us and that God is going to take us forward into these next 50 years. And I really do believe that the greatest years for IC are ahead.
Bucky, do you have any questions?
Yeah. How is this role different maybe from other jobs that you've had here at IC or before?
It obviously is a different focus in the spiritual realm of things. Not that my business career of over 30 years was not with a spiritual focus, because it was. I always felt like I was kind of the pastor or the shepherd of our people that worked for our organization. But at the same time, the vast depth of the different things that we have. Yes, we had different things in our car dealership, different departments, different makes and models, and you had to have a lot of knowledge, but every day there is some spiritual thing that comes out of what we do. And to me, that is so fulfilling. I can look back, Bucky, over my career in the automobile business and then as a worship pastor when I sold the business and got into church work full time and became a worship pastor. I can look back at things that I learned and that I was faced with in business and in church life that now have prepared me for what I'm doing right now. And I know that's not me, that's God. You can look at those things and you can look at those markers that have been put down across my career and my life. And I can tell that God had me on a path. And that path may have been crooked, it may have been a little winding, but it always comes back to where he wants me. And I feel like that's where I am right now, exactly where he wants me. Strange enough for such a time as this. It's crazy, and I'm so humbled and so honored to be in this position.
We're glad that you are.
Thank you.
It's fun to work with you. Sometimes in a role like this, I think this is true really of anybody that works with our administrative staff, especially we see all the things that are going on in all these different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And some days it's kind of hard not to feel that weight of the world on our shoulders.
Exactly.
How do you take that and sleep at night?
You talking about last night?
Well, so in your role in particular, you're the leader of all of the organization. Yeah. And so you've got to give answers sometimes for, what are we going to do about this? Or what are we going to do over there? Where do you find your rest and peace? How do you sleep at night and get up and do it again the next day?
Again, that's dependence on the Lord. And to be honest, it needs to be total dependence. And sometimes that's hard to do. As a human, as a guy, I want to take control of that. I want to grab a hold of it and I want to fix it. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how us guys are. But sometimes we need to do the Psalm 46:10 and sit back and wait on the Lord and let him guide the way. So many times I have found over my life that works better than me trying to jump in there and do it. One thing that I learned from my granddad and my dad in business and over the years was, and they would say, son, you've got to work like it all depended on you, but you have to pray like it all depended on God. And so I find myself almost in a constant state of prayer. Lord, what am I going to do about this? We just had this happen, and now we've got people that are stranded. Or, Lord, what are we going to do? This cancellation has occurred. Or, Lord, what are we going to do? We've got this bill that's coming up. We need to pay so that this person can go and do the ministry, but yet the money hasn't come in yet, or whatever that case may be. And I got to be honest, there are spiritual attacks that happen when you're in a position of leadership. And I have felt more spiritual attacks even in these first 3 months. And I have to guard myself against that. I have to do the Ephesians 5 and put on the whole armor of God, because we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. We wrestle against the powers and the principalities of this world. And I'm not going to let Satan win. We don't want him to win. We want to show the victory through Christ, because I've read the back of the book and we win. The victory is already ours in Christ.
It's a great place to focus.
It is.
Because we already know that we win. Jesus wins.
Praise
and we're on
God.
the side.
Yeah.
So I think I hear you saying that part of the key to this is to realize that it doesn't really depend on you.
That's right.
And that you have responsibilities to lead this organization and to steward it as well as you can, but to leave the results to God.
Yes. And I think some of my quote unquote management style is to let people do their jobs, is to let you do what you do
like
best.
Make up a podcast.
Like make up a podcast and invite the president. Brooke, in the stories that she finds that are real live stories that come in from our reports, and then to put them in a clever social media post that just grips my heart, and it causes people to look and to go, what is this I see? What is this International Commission? What do you mean I could do that? I'm not talented like that. Well, but God can make you talented that way. Whatever it is, to give the people the opportunity to do their jobs and to lead them the best that I can, to have as pure a heart as I can have, and, work like it all depended on me and pray like it all depended on God.
It's awesome. What is the coolest thing you've seen God do in your time here at IC?
There are so many things personally that have happened on international projects or national projects. There are so many things that I have read. There are so many things that I have heard through others that it really is hard to pinpoint one particular thing that stands out the most. I am so blessed to be a part of the fact that we go and we see people come to Christ. On one of our projects that we were a part of, there was a grandmother who was not a believer. Her family was there. They had all gathered together. It was an appointment that had been set up by our church people. We go to the appointment, and this grandmother that we knew going in that the point and the purpose was to hopefully see this grandmother come to faith in Christ. And so we laid out our testimonies the best that we could. It was Allie and myself. And we went and we did the best job that we could possibly do. And it was like it was falling on deaf ears. And she was not budging from, and it was being interpreted, but we could tell it was not getting through. And her son had come all the way from another town far away in that country. And he spoke then and said, "Mama, this is why our family is here, because this is so important to us. We have done this. We have given our hearts and lives to Christ. We want you to spend eternity with us in heaven." And she sat there for a minute and she still did not respond. And then it was like you could see the members in the family and they were praying. We were praying silently as we looked upon that scene. And all of a sudden, we just kind of moved on from that and we were giving a little bit of goodbyes. All of a sudden, the grandmother stood up in the room and she said in her native language, "I have something to say." And then she burst forth and said, "I want to follow Jesus as my Savior." And she gave her heart to the Lord right there. And you talk about a family celebration. I forget how many people. I've got a picture of it, but there were, I don't know, 15, 20 people there. Aunt,
Wow.
uncle, sister, brothers, all of that, sons and daughters. And what a celebration. And to be a part of that and to know that I won't see her again on this side of heaven, but I will see her again in heaven. And to know that God allowed me to see that and to be a part of that and allowed Allie to be a part of that is just a blessing. So important things happen on these trips. God things happen on these trips. Y'all need to come with us and excitingly see what God is doing in the midst of a crazy world. God is still sovereign.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
Hard to break there, but we're going to move on to our next segment with we're going to end this episode with a Did You Know segment.
Okay.
We've done one before where I answered questions about Germany. And now we're going to ask Brooke some questions about Afghan peoples.
Oh, cool.
Because the Lord has allowed her to work with Afghan peoples and to see her thoughts and experiences there. She's never been overseas to work with them, but she's worked among refugees here in the U.S. So her experience is solely based on being with them in that context. I actually got the opportunity to also work with Afghan refugees in Central Asia, in their part of the world. And I feel like our experiences might be a little bit different.
Right.
But we both have fallen in love with this people group. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to hear, we want to hear more about what's it like and what opportunity has God put on the table for us here in the States to be able to reach and love someone that otherwise would be so far away from us. And I can tell you it's very far away.
Yeah.
God's brought them to our doorstep, and it's an opportunity we should not squander.
Did you know?
Well, let's talk about why they're here, Brooke. Why have they come?
The Afghans have come here because of the Taliban taking over. So the United States had taken armies that, our people out, that was kind of there as partial protection for the people. And the Taliban had taken over. And this was really a dangerous time. Lots of people were killed and everything, but people were just flooding out of their home country and going anywhere. The United States is also not the only place that hosts Afghan refugees. They're all around the world. They're in Tajikistan and Pakistan. They're in Germany and Italy. They're
Mm.
all, I don't even know where all they are, but I know that there's scattered groups of people throughout the world that have just fled from Taliban rule.
And some are of course, in major cities, maybe smaller towns too. I'm not sure. I know a lot of refugee resettlement hotspots are in kind of rural towns, but I know that in some major cities here in the U.S., there are a lot of Afghan families that are being resettled here, and different organizations will do that on purpose to kind of put them among some of their own people, because it's really hard to go to a new place where the culture is totally different, language is different, money's different, everything so different. Housing is different, infrastructure is different, everything. It's hard enough to totally start over like that. But if you can be around some of your own people, it can make it maybe not easy, but it
helps a lot. And even among families where, I mean, it's very common for Afghan families to have 5, 6, 7 to 10 children. They're very huge families usually. But even among big families, they're a communal people. They're tribal people. They like to be together. And so, you go to cities and there'll be apartment complexes that are, it's like, okay, those are Afghan people. They fill that complex pretty much, And so I think that, like you said, Bucky, the organizations in the United States kind of do that purposefully so that they can be together kind of in those pockets. But also, I mean, some of them have had to move because they can't afford that apartment complex. And it's hard for them. Like, my friends are there. My family is in this other complex and we can't go to them all the time. And so it's a lot harder for them in adapting. And especially, among some women, a lot of them don't get jobs. They stay at home because there's only one car. And also just culturally, the women will stay home and take care of their young children. And so they have a lot harder time learning the language because they're just with their children. They're just with their female friends. And so it's a lot harder for them to kind of adapt to culture whenever they're not able to be out in culture. And so they definitely need a lot of grace.
Because people are trying,
Yeah.
What I experienced in Central Asia is, well, for one thing, every family that I met had experienced great loss and trauma and tragedy. They had lost somebody either that was killed by the Taliban or was killed on the journey, or was killed by an injury or an illness that they couldn't get medical care for, maybe even in the country that they were living in. But they were just placed into a situation of poverty, maybe even more extreme than what they were in before. And they just don't have access to normal things we take for granted, or maybe even that the citizens of their hosting country take for granted. And they've all been through so much, and they are trying their absolute best just to make it and just to survive with their children. And many of them want to go somewhere else, to come to the West. What they don't know is that they're in for some challenges when they get here as well. Brooke, can you talk about some of the particular difficulties that Afghan families face as refugees in the United States?
Yeah, I think one, of course, is going to be language learning. It's just hard, coming to a different country where you've experienced already so much trauma, and then you're coming here trying to learn a new language, trying to learn a new culture. And so that's immediately one of the first challenges. I mean, we talk about going overseas for a week, and it's like you get overwhelmed by culture, but that doesn't mean you learn the culture at all. That doesn't mean that culture will become, a part of you. And I mean, so the children will have challenges in being kind of a third culture child, if you've heard that term before. So, you might have been born in a country, but you grow up in a different country. And so you're immersed constantly within two different cultures. And so you kind of have that cultural struggle of, I'm Afghan, but I'm also American. So that's kind of a challenge in and of itself. Some other challenges they face that I've seen is people are just really harsh toward them. They have a lot of prejudice towards these people. And I think that they just don't realize that these people have been through so much. They have some prejudice of like, well, they might be mean, they might be bad people for whatever reason, thinking of past terrorism events, things like that. So they hold, these specific events against an entire group of people, which I think we do that in general a lot of times. People just do that.
Yeah.
And we're
And
unaware of some of those prejudices
we
sometimes.
are really
The
unaware of
reality is these people are fleeing those bad guys.
Yeah.
right.
They're coming here because they want to get
Looking
away
for a
from that
better life.
ideology and all those
Yeah.
other things we're
Yeah.
afraid of.
Yeah. And so that's a major struggle that they come and face is people can be just really cruel to them. And I have some friends who've told me about how people are just really mean to them and the kids can be bullied sometimes at school by other people.
Mm.
And just also the children, they're used to running around and playing outside and not having any real fear. I mean, they grew up in a country that it doesn't seem like that should be that way, but it was. That's how they grew up. They grew up outside, they would play together and everything. And we come here and we try and tell them, hey, you have to be careful here. You came expecting that America would be really safe and really good, but there's different challenges that are here as well. And that was really sad. I encountered a young boy and his brother got beaten up on the school bus just for being in a seat. And someone told him to move and he wouldn't. And he told me, we left Afghanistan and it was supposed to be better here. And I told him, it just broke my heart. It made me so sad. And I said, it's not that America's better. It's just that every single every single place in the world is broken and we all have sin. And it doesn't matter where you go in this world, you're going to find some bad things wherever you go. And so that was really challenging to realize just how people can still be really bad to them, and they fled horrible things and they come here and they're facing different challenges as well. So
Can I ask Brooke a question?
Of course.
Brooke, I know that you personally and your husband Caleb have taken in some of these refugees in the areas that you have lived, and you have met with these people. How are some of the ways that you can encourage us as Christians to reach out to these people groups? What are some of the ways that you have found that they are receptive to? What are some of the ways that you can break down some of those walls, or that our listeners could break down some of those walls and begin a relationship with people like that?
yeah, that's a really good question. I think, especially if you're in larger cities and you might know that there's some refugees in the area, and even not just among Afghans, but among, refugees, Muslims in general, is knowing where there are pockets of them throughout your city. And especially among refugees, I think that they are, for the most part, pretty open to people. And they're used to people coming in. They're a very, very hospitable group of people. I'm telling you, they're some of the most hospitable groups of people I have ever met in my entire life. They're so welcoming. Yes. So hospitable. If you know people who know some of them, ask to be introduced to them. Or, I mean, there's been times whenever we've just come and knocked on their door and they might look at us weird, but we just say like, hi, we wanted to come say hi to you and everything. And if you have a translator on your phone, you can use that. But also going to parks, that's how I've met some people as well, is just going to parks where I know that they are and being purposeful and going over to them. Because I think that we can be a little intimidated. It is intimidating. Believe me, I've felt intimidated. But whenever there's groups of women that are all just there and I'm like, they don't know English, I don't know their language, but I'm just going to go over there. We're going to say hi, see how they're doing. And so I think just, asking the Lord for guidance, praying for them that they'll have soft hearts. But a lot of times they will be really open and they want to make friends with people here. And especially among believers, I mean, they have seen, we have some friends who they have seen Christians be much better to them than their own people are. And so just you can show the love of Christ in ways that obviously people who don't have Christ can. They can't do that. And so I think just learning where they are is a big thing. Learn if you want to meet these people, find out what apartment complexes they're in. Go to certain parks. The women love to go to parks, especially bringing their children there. So go to public parks and see if there's any people there, and then just try and say hi to them. Ask them about their children, about their families. Ask them where they're from, and you might be able to see how much English do they know. And if you have a translator app on your phone, you can even type in some questions to have ready, to kind of learn a little bit, just to kind of show them, hey, I'm trying to welcome you here. And so I think that they really value that. And I've said even just a few words to people. They're like, oh, wow, you know our language. No, I don't. I
No.
just know a few words, but they
Google is my
find a
friend.
lot of value in that. So
Yeah.
People really appreciate that, though,
I
that,
think they do.
you've tried and you've cared
Yeah.
enough to.
Yeah. You know,
try to speak their
I
language.
served in a couple of different churches where we had the ESL programs, and obviously there's different ones for different people groups and so forth, but maybe somebody could reach out to their church and they've got a program or they know of a place that has those people groups in them, and especially if they had the Afghan people, you could make a connection that way too.
yes,
I'm going to put a
that
couple
is
of
a really good idea.
And I'm going to put a couple links in the show notes for this episode for websites where you can go and just look up by your state, and then we'll look down to where you are, where there are organizations that are working with refugees.
That's
and
cool.
Those are places that you can call and ask, hey, where are these, or just where are refugees being settled in general? Or if you have a heart for Afghan people, ask specifically if he's working with them. Our office is near Dallas, and I know here in Dallas, there's maybe about a dozen organizations that serve refugees, and there are a couple that are specifically focused on Afghan refugees. And so there's plenty to do. And when I go and I ask, what's the best thing that I can do with me and my whole family, there's definitely opportunities because there are so many kids.
Yes.
There's so many families here, and just some of them have after school clubs, or they have conversation clubs with the women and things like that. But the response a lot of times to what was the best thing I can do with my family is come and play with the kids while their parents are working on stuff. Come and talk to them. And anyone can do that.
Yeah.
That's not very intimidating.
Yeah. And also the benefit about the children is if you're with the children and a parent, the children are learning language so fast.
Quicker.
Yeah.
Yes, they learn the language so fast. That's how we can translate sometimes, is by talking to the children. And sometimes they'll help us. Sometimes they just leave the room and they're not helpful. But sometimes they can be. And so, Mark, you had mentioned ESL classes. I think that is a really good way. Even, starting your own. I mean, we may not be experienced ESL people, but that was a way that we tried to get in with families, is to show them, hey, we'd love to teach you. We know that you're here. We would love to teach you some language, and we'd also love to learn language. And so even bringing a marker board and pointing to things and showing them, hey, this means shirt. What is this in your language? And
that's cool.
So learning that way, so that they're not seeing they just want me to become a part of their culture. No, we want to learn about you as well. We want to learn your language as well. And so I think that is a way to be able to kind of engage and have a reason why you're there, other than I'm coming to share the gospel with you. Be like, I'm going to, teach you English. And so
it's building that relationship. Again, a lot of the things that we do with our Operation Andrew, it's building that relationship. And then you gain the trust, so to speak, of that person, and you're able to have a deeper conversation, and ultimately a gospel conversation that possibly leads them to Christ.
And that's really what opened doors when I was in Central Asia, is the place where we were. A lot of the families that we visited had never had an American visit
in their
apartment.
Yeah.
And that just in itself meant a lot to them, that someone would come so far.
Right.
And just want to sit with them and have tea with them. And of course, they're so hospitable. These people may have nothing in their refugee situation, but they will give you tea or little candies or whatever they've got. And just to sit with them and share stories with them and listen to what has happened to them.
Yeah.
Tell me about your family. What do you know about God? What can we pray for you about? And then can I share some Bible stories with you? And seeing that God really will put words and stories from the Bible on your heart to share with these people, and he will speak to them that way.
Right.
And it's just awesome to watch people's eyes become open and hearts become open because you showed up and proven that someone loves them and you care. Brooke, what has gripped your heart about Afghan people in particular? Why are you passionate about this?
At first I think it was mainly an opportunity. My husband and I had lived in an apartment, and then they had groups of Afghans had moved into the apartment complex right next to us. And so we just saw, hey, this is an opportunity. And so it was at first about that, but then I started to become more drawn to them, just seeing how hospitable they were. There's things in their culture that I would love to be able to adopt for my own self, and for our family and everything. They're a beautiful people. I mean, just so beautiful. Their culture is unique.
I think
And
their art is really beautiful. Their art and textiles, and even, I mean, their appearance.
yes,
They
physically
have good
beautiful.
genes. The Lord has blessed them in that department.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think that, and a lot of them are pretty open. And I think that that's been cool to see. But honestly, just being around them, and I've learned this about myself, and I think that you guys can probably attest to this and relate to this, is when we're around a group of people, a culture, you start to love them.
Mhm.
And so, it doesn't matter where you go to Peru, you go to Central Asia, you go to Southeast Asia or Africa, and you're around a group of people for any specific time. And it's just, you love them, you love the culture that they are, and you love the differences in them. And there are hard things about their culture that's really challenging and different, but it's just, the Lord, I think, puts love in our hearts for people whenever you spend time with them and you're intentional with them. I want to have more of a love for them. And so I think, I've been around Latino people in different times in my life, loved them. And then I meet with different Muslims. And I'm like, man, I love you all as well. I think that you're very interesting, and you have different culture than I do. And it's really cool. So
I think we have a lot of advantages when I know a lot of times we think about the challenges when relating to, and particularly talking about the gospel with Muslim people, but we have a lot of advantages there in the fact that we have some common ground. They're willing to talk about God.
Mm-hmm.
They think that if you have a faith, if you're a person of faith, it's important to you and you're going to talk about it. Mm-hmm. We also believe in some of the basic stories of the Bible. They believe in the prophets, and you can begin lots of conversations from there on. Well, who is Isa al-Masih then? And there's a lot more open doors than you might assume that are there. But especially if you're starting from this place of love, where you just love them as people. Mm-hmm. You love their family. You love them as individuals. That's where gospel conversations are just naturally going to come from and flow out of that sincere love that you have. So I like what you said, Mark, about building relationships. That's where the roots of the gospel can reach down. That's where you can plant seeds and win an opportunity to share the hope that we have with a people that's desperately looking for hope.
Yep.
Let me just say that I am so proud of both of you and your spouses and your families, because I know what you were saying, it's truth. And I know that I've seen the results of what you've done with your groups that you work with, and Brooke, the ones that you work with. And I'm so proud to be a part of that. And I'll just say, if that's you and you're out there listening, there's a place for you at IC. We need people, and especially I'm proud of the younger generation that you guys are. My generation didn't do that as well, but we're learning from you. And I just want to say publicly that I appreciate that so much. I love you both.
We love you too.
We love you, Mark.
I really appreciate what I get to learn and be exposed to on the field with IC. Yeah. And not just because I work with IC, but any of you can go with us as well. Yeah. And you might meet a particular people group or people in a certain culture that you really fall in love with.
Yes.
And you may go back, or you may pray for them and invest in ministry there, or you may come back home and find where they live, where you live. And I just think that's such a cool thing. Yeah. We could talk on and on and on and all day about this, and particularly about how to build bridges of love with Muslim people from all different cultures and parts of the world. But we have a lot of resources on that already. Mm-hmm. You can look back in our podcast feed, or if you go online and look at resources we have, there are plenty of materials about how to share the gospel with Muslim people. And some of that's going to translate to Afghans or other Muslim people. And so you can go there and you can learn about all sorts of other worldviews and backgrounds and religions, different methods for sharing the gospel, so that you can be faithful right where you live and around the world. If you want to go with us, go to internationalcommission.org. You can find those resources there, and you can also sign up to go with us. You can sign up to join our prayer team, and you can sign up to give to help us continue doing this and continue reaching people all around the world. Thanks so much, Mark, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And thank you all to everyone who is listening. Let's continue equipping and enabling each other until everyone has had a chance to hear the good news of Jesus. All right. We'll see you next time.